Pa has a theory on fools. He says that one is bad enough, but when two or more come together, they have a power that is kin to when atoms come busting apart and the raw energy that holds everything together is released, creating a kind of mass confusion. And if his theory is true, then the Passel of Fools was sure to be a wham-banger. Pa swore it would make the 4th of July fireworks show seem like no more than a baby's burp and slobber. The way the whole celebration come about, according to Pa, was that a Jewish minister fella applied to the city for the right to put his menorah up on city property, right on the square downtown, along with the Christmas trees, the skating rink, the manger scene, the angels, and old Santa Claus. The Jewish people don't celebrate Christmas like we do. They celebrate something called Passover instead. Mrs. Hutchins told us that, too. Andy Berman asked her why they called it Passover, and Mrs. Hutchins said it was 'cause Sandy don't stop at none of the Jewish homes. An awful predicament, I think, especially for folks that calls themselves the chosen people. Mrs. Hutchins said the Jews had a long history of suffering, and I can see why. I would never want to get singled out for nothing like that. I asked Pa what a menorah was, and he said he wasn't sure. It was a stand with a bunch of candles on it, and it probably meant the Jewish people were proud of being Jewish. He said he wasn't sure what all being Jewish meant, other than eating some kind of pickled fish and potato pancakes and wearing a little hat on your head that was so small you had to hold it in place with a bobby pin, unless you was bald, and Pa said then he didn't know what they used, maybe a dab of glue. Golly, bad hats and no Christmas too. Those Jewish folks sure take their suffering seriously. Anyway, it took this Jewish minister fella a few years, but he was persistent. Pa says the Jewish people are nothing if not persistent. It might be something in the fish. And he got permission to put up his menorah and light his candles and tell the world he was proud to be a Jew. The judge in the case ruled that he had a right to do this because of the constitutional guarantee of free speech, which, if you recall, is where this whole thing got started. Pa says that guarantees is another problem area, along with offering things for free and making speeches and big crowds. He says that the only thing that should be allowed to have a guarantee is mufflers, and even that is a ripoff because it don't include the labor or the pipes. Anyway, there was the guarantee, the free, and the speech, and the menorah went up, but the candles on it were barely lit when the Ku Klux Klan got into the act, applying for the right to demonstrate their beliefs on that same city property, and for the very same reason, namely, guaranteed free speech. According to Pa, this was the actual birth of the Passel of Fools. Up to that time, it was like when the baby is still living inside its mama, but now it come out into the world for everyone to see. The Jews and the Klan, you see, is mortal enemies, like the Hatfields and the McCoys. Those people had a falling out over a pig, was how that started. And in no time at all, they was killing each other right and left over that pig. I asked Pa what become of the pig, and he told me it was long gone. But those people had turned it into generations of sorrow. Pa said that people had it in them to turn a disagreement over a pig into killing and war and genocides and holocausts. Now this more recent ruckus between the Jews and the Klan is over Christmas. I personally would not like to fight over either one, a pig or Christmas. But Pa says I will come to understand when I grow up that folks can wind up spitting over cornflakes if the stars ain't right. He told me once that a man said that fighting come as natural to us as apple pie, and I hope he ain't right about that, because I just love apple pie, especially the way my mama makes it. Anyway, the Jews was in an awful fix when it come to this. You see, they don't believe in Christmas or the Klan, but Pa said they wouldn't even trade in their little hats or their pickled fish for free speech. They think so much of it. So in a sense, they had to stick up for the Klan, who is their mortal enemies. I know this gets confusing. I had a hard time following it myself. Pa says the confusion goes back to free speech and a tradition that stretches all the way on back to something he calls the Tower of Babylon, which was a great big tower where everybody in the world could get up and say whatever they wanted. Nobody ever listened. They all just talked and talked and talked. It was a monument to free speech, kind of like the UN. Pa says the closest we come today to that Tower of Babylon is talk radio, cable TV, and the modern-day celebration on the square, the Passel of Fools. Now the Klan, for their part, said they had a right to celebrate in public, just like the Jews, just like anybody else, because of that guarantee of free speech. Pa said he reckoned that was so, but he wondered if somebody who called himself a Ku Klux was really like anybody else. Out where we live, we know some about the Klan. Kendall Riggs was hot for it a few years back. He was hot for cockfights, and he used to raise pit bulls until one of them turned on him and seized his foot, and he grabbed a gun to shoot it and blew both his foot and the dog to kingdom come. They say the dog is now in heaven, still holding on to Mr. Riggs's ankle and awaiting on the rest of him to reach the promised land. After that incident, Mr. Riggs's interest in the Klan kind of waned, but Pa maintained that it was typical of the kind of men who'd go around in bed sheets that they'd shoot their own feet off. The city wasn't happy about the Klan's request, and they did their best to prevent it, but free speech had opened the door. That's what Pa said. At home, Ma is always telling us to close the door, lest we let in all the flies. Pa said that America prides herself on being an open door, so they had to let the Klan in, along with anybody else who wanted to make a free speech. The price of principle is what Pa called that. He said it can get to be mighty steep. Have a few, choose them careful, and hold on to them, he told me, because someday, sure as you're born, you will be called to pay their full price. And in the meantime, mind the door and watch out for all the flies. When I asked Pa what the Ku Klux Klan was all about, he reminded me of Kendall Riggs, and he said it was a bunch of fellers who couldn't bowl, shoot pool, spit proper, or play cards and go home with their pants on. So they turned to having meetings where they would all wear sheets and pillowcases, brandish loaded weapons, burn crosses, beller like they got a 6-inch hardwood splinter in their big toes, and quote from the Bible to prove everything they believed was the gospel truth. Pa says that any man can quote scripture, but only a few can shoot pool. He told me that when he gave me a cue stick for my birthday, a beauty with inlaid pearl that screws apart and has my initials cut into the stock. Already I can run the table, but I can't beat Pa. Not yet.